What if I told you that under just the right conditions, you could become the oppressor, the betrayer, the one who turns away as others suffer? Not because you're cruel, not because you're broken, but because you're human. And the human mind, for all its brilliance, is frighteningly malleable. In labs, classrooms, and hospitals, scientists have run some of the most disturbing experiments imaginable, pushing the limits of morality, free will, and sanity. They wanted to understand how fear works, how power corrupts, how easily we fall in line, betray each other, or stay silent while evil wins. These weren't stories, these were real, documented, measured experiments, and the results terrifying. In this video, we're diving into the darkest psychological experiments ever conducted, what they revealed about the human mind, and how those same forces are still shaping our world today. Welcome to the truth about human nature and the terrifying science that exposed it. We're going to start with the real crazy one. This is how they took an innocent baby and turned him into a vessel of pure fear, with nothing more than a white rat and a sudden noise. His name was Little Albert. He was just 9 months old when psychologists John B. Watson and Rosalie Rayner introduced him to a white rat. At first, Albert loved the rat. He even played with it. But then, every time the rat came near, they smashed a metal pipe behind his head, which was loud, sudden, and terrifying to this practically newborn baby. Albert began to cry, not just at the rat, but soon at rabbits, dogs, fur coats, even Santa Claus's fluffy old beard. They had successfully conditioned him to fear anything that was white and fuzzy, pretty much like Pavlov's dogs, but more evil. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. This wasn't just about a baby and a rat. This was a blueprint for something much bigger and much more dark. Because if fear can be manufactured in a child, it can be engineered in society. Every time you scroll and see another threat, another crisis, another enemy, what's the sound inside your head? Is it someone talking on the news, a scary headline, a siren? Fear gets repeated and repeated and repeated until it becomes habit, until you're scared of things you never used to question, until the world starts to feel unsafe, even when it isn't. Little Albert taught us one terrifying truth. Fear isn't always natural. Sometimes it's installed, and the ones installing it, they're counting on you not to notice. And if Little Albert showed us how easily fear can be planted into the mind of an individual, the third wave showed us how quickly entire groups will surrender their freedom, not at gunpoint, but willingly, for the comfort of identity and belonging. Let me set the scene. It was 1967. A history teacher named Ron Jones was trying to explain Nazi Germany to his high school students in California. They didn't get it. They couldn't understand how millions of people went along with it, how an entire society could conform to something so clearly evil. So Jones decided to stop explaining and start demonstrating. He began with structure. On the first day, he enforced strict discipline. Students had to sit upright, speak only when called upon, and answer questions in 3 words or less. They were told, strength through discipline. And just like that, something shifted. Students, many of whom were usually passive or disengaged, became sharp, alert, obedient. They liked it. The next day, Jones introduced strength through community. Students greeted each other with a salute. They had slogans, symbols, and rules. They started reporting those who broke them. By the third day, the group had a name, the third wave, and it had grown. Word spread through the school. Students begged to join. Those who questioned it were shamed, mocked, even threatened. By day 4, it was no longer a classroom experiment. It was a movement. Over 200 students were actively participating. They created armbands, they recruited, they patrolled. Jones assigned roles, leaders, enforcers, informants. Dissent vanished. Loyalty was everything. Some students admitted they felt safer with the rules, more powerful, more important. Others said they didn't like it, but didn't want to be singled out. Jones had created a microcosm of fascism in less than a week. And on the final day, Jones told the students the movement was real, that the third wave was part of a national effort, and they would soon meet their leader at a rally. The students, hundreds of them, gathered in the auditorium, buzzing with anticipation. But when the curtain opened, there was no leader, no rally, just a blank screen. Then, Jones played a film reel of Hitler, the Nazi regime, the rallies, the genocide. The room grew quiet, and he told them the truth. You all would have made excellent Nazis. The point was painfully clear. People don't fall into authoritarianism because they're evil. They fall because it gives them something they crave: order, identity, power, a role to play, a group to belong to. The third wave proved that you don't need fear to create submission. You just need a sense of purpose, hierarchy, and the illusion of being on the right side. And when that illusion takes hold, freedom becomes negotiable. Individual thought becomes dangerous, and resistance becomes isolation. This didn't happen in 1930s Germany. It happened in a California classroom, fast, voluntarily, and with frightening enthusiasm. Today, we like to believe we've evolved, that we'd see it coming. But authoritarianism doesn't always come wrapped in flags and marching boots. Sometimes it shows up as hashtags and algorithms. Sometimes it looks like your friend group, your politics, your favorite cause. And if you ever catch yourself silencing your own thoughts to fit in, parroting what everyone else is saying, or punishing someone just for thinking differently, ask yourself, is this still me, or have I joined the wave? So, if the third wave showed how groups can be manipulated into giving up their freedom for the illusion of belonging, this next experiment shows how even a single child can be broken permanently with nothing but words. No beatings, no isolation, no torture chambers, just carefully delivered sentences from someone they trusted. This is what happens when authority turns its gaze to the most vulnerable minds. This is the monster study. It was 1939, at the height of eugenics, institutional cruelty, and unquestioned psychological authority. A group of researchers at the University of Iowa, led by speech pathologist Wendell Johnson, decided to investigate how stuttering develops in children. They couldn't ethically induce stuttering in normal kids, so they did something far worse. They used orphans, children with no parents to protect them, no families to fight back. 22 children at the Iowa Soldiers and Sailors Orphans Home were divided into two groups. Half were praised and encouraged for their speech, even if they had minor imperfections. The other half, the test group, were told they spoke poorly, that their words were wrong, their speech was flawed, broken, broken, embarrassing. They were mocked, corrected obsessively, made to feel like every sentence was a failure. Here's the catch. None of those kids had any speech issues before the experiment, but by the end, some of them developed severe speech problems, lifelong stutters, social withdrawal, psychological trauma that never went away. They became anxious, insecure, afraid to speak at all, some of them for the rest of their lives. No physical abuse, just repeated, subtle suggestions from adults in white coats, from people who acted like they knew best, people they trusted. That's why they called it the monster study. The monster study shattered any illusion that psychological damage requires violence. It revealed that the human mind, especially the developing mind, is like wet cement, and our words carve into it. Authority doesn't need to yell or hit, it just needs to repeat. You're not good enough. You're not speaking right. Something is wrong with you. Over time, those phrases become beliefs. Those beliefs become identity. And identity becomes a cage. Now think about today, the constant flow of criticism, social media comments, grading systems, performance reviews, diagnosis labels, opinions masquerading as facts. We're surrounded by invisible voices telling us who we are, what we're worth, what we should fear or hide or be ashamed of, and we internalize it, just like those orphans did. Only now, we call it normal. The monster study wasn't just a failure of ethics, it was a glimpse into a deeper truth, that words, delivered with authority, can shape or shatter a human being. That cruelty doesn't always scream, it whispers. The scariest part, most of us are still listening. The monster study showed us how language, delivered by authority, can damage the human mind, but the Milgram experiment showed us something way darker. Under the right conditions, many of us will harm others, not out of hatred, but out of obedience, because someone in a lab coat said it was okay. In 1961, Yale psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to answer a terrifying question. How far will people go when they're just following orders? He was inspired by the Nazi trials at Nuremberg, where war criminals repeatedly defended their actions with one phrase, I was just doing my job. So Milgram designed a deceptively simple experiment. Volunteers were told they were participating in a study about learning and memory. Each was assigned the role of teacher. In another room, separated by a wall, was the learner, who was an actor working with Milgram. The teacher was instructed to read word pairs and administer electric shocks to the learner whenever the learner gave a wrong answer. Each wrong answer increased the voltage from mild to dangerous to lethal. And with every scream, every plea to stop, every bang on the wall, the volunteer would turn to the authority figure, calmly dressed in a lab coat, who would simply say, "The experiment must continue." The actor would even scream about his heart condition, begging the volunteer for their life. The volunteer kept shocking the learner even after they went limp and stopped responding at all. And once again, the authority figure would say, "It's very important that you continue." So how many people do you think refused? Surely most of them stopped, right? Wrong. Over 65% of participants went all the way, delivering what they believed to be a fatal 450-volt shock, simply because a man in a white coat told them to. No guns, no threats, no hatred, just obedience. Their hands were shaking, some were sweating, stuttering, visibly distressed, but they kept going. And when asked later, many said the same thing. I didn't want to, but I thought I had no choice. The Milgram experiment shattered the comforting illusion that atrocities are committed only by monsters. It revealed a truth far more disturbing. That under the right circumstances, almost anyone is capable of inflicting pain if they believe someone else is responsible. The presence of authority doesn't just influence behavior, it rewrites morality. It outsources conscience. It tells people, you're not doing this, we are. Now step outside the lab. How often do we see people stay silent when they know something is wrong because they're told it's protocol? How often do we witness harm, injustice, censorship, or cruelty and hear the excuse,
I'm just doing what I was told.
Bureaucracies, governments, corporations, algorithms. The Milgram dynamic is everywhere. We follow policies that hurt people because questioning them means stepping outside the group. Because authority speaks calmly, confidently, and with credentials. Because it feels easier to obey than to resist. The Milgram experiment wasn't about voltage, it was about violation. About how easily we give away our moral compass the moment someone else says it's not your responsibility. It proved that ordinary people, people like you and me, can become tools of destruction in the hands of calm, persuasive authority. The most terrifying part, they weren't evil, they were polite, they were educated, they were normal people, and they believed they were doing the right thing. Alright, so far we've seen how authority can convince people to hurt others, how easily obedience can override conscience, how vulnerable our brains are to criticism and herd mentality. But in my opinion, this next experiment is the craziest of them all and proves something even more chilling. That once you're labeled as broken, no one will believe you're sane ever again, even if you do everything right. This is the Rosenhan experiment, and it didn't test people, it tested the system itself. In the early 1970s, psychologist David Rosenhan had a question. Can psychiatrists actually tell who's mentally ill and who isn't? So he designed an experiment that would shake the foundations of modern psychiatry. He and 7 other perfectly healthy people, doctors, psychologists, grad students, posed as patients and got themselves admitted into psychiatric hospitals. Their only symptom? They claimed to hear a voice in their head saying the word thud. That was it. No other symptoms, no erratic behavior, everything else about them was normal. And every single one of them was diagnosed with a mental disorder, most commonly, schizophrenia. Once admitted, these pseudo-patients acted completely normal. They told staff they felt fine. They said the voice had stopped. They behaved politely, took notes, and followed every rule. But the hospital staff didn't see sanity. They saw symptoms. They interpreted normal behavior through the lens of mental illness. Taking notes, that was called obsessive note-taking behavior. Asking when they'd be discharged, labeled as paranoia. Some were forced to take medications. One was confined for 52 days. Not a single staff member realized they were sane. The other patients, though, they knew. Many told them,
"You're not crazy, you're just a journalist or a researcher."
But the staff, the experts, missed it completely. When Rosenhan revealed the results, the psychiatric community was outraged. One hospital challenged him. They said, "We won't make that mistake again. Send us your fakes. We'll spot them this time." So, Rosenhan agreed. Over the next few months, the hospital identified 41 imposters. But here's the twist. Rosenhan never sent anyone else. Every single person they flagged as a fake was a real patient. The Rosenhan experiment revealed something deeply unsettling. Once a person is labeled mentally ill, every action they take is seen through that distorted lens. Reality doesn't matter anymore. Perception does. Authority does. It also exposed how mental institutions, intended to heal, can easily become places of containment, control, and quiet dismissal. Patients stopped being people. They became diagnoses. And no matter how rational, kind, or self-aware they acted, they were still seen as broken. Rosenhan's study wasn't just about psychiatry. It was about the power of labels and how fragile reality becomes when someone else controls the narrative of who you are. Once you're seen as crazy, your words lose their weight. Your truth loses its value. You become invisible, even as you scream. It begs the question, how much of what we call madness is real? And how much is just social expectation wrapped in medical language? In a world obsessed with diagnosis, control, and classification, how many people are trapped inside a label they never earned or deserved? And if that label was put on you, would anyone believe you're still sane? Alright, so let's take a step back and look at what we just uncovered. A baby, stripped of innocence and taught to fear the world. Children, scarred by the power of negative words. People who obeyed unspeakable orders just because someone in a lab coat told them to. And others locked away, not for being insane, but for being labeled. We watched an entire class of students give up their freedom for the illusion of belonging, just to feel like they mattered to something bigger than themselves. These weren't horror films, these were experiments. This was real life. This is human nature, unfiltered. But here's the part they don't teach you in school. The real danger isn't just in the institutions. It's not just in the scientists or the doctors or the authority figures. The real danger is how easily we surrender our power. How quickly we believe that someone else knows better than we do. How effortlessly the outside world can whisper into our minds until we can't tell the difference between their voice and our own.
"You're not good enough.
You're broken.
You should be afraid.
You don't belong unless you follow the rules." These are the lies people are fed from childhood to adulthood, by systems, by institutions, by media, by anyone who benefits from a population too scared to think for itself. And if we're not careful, we start to repeat those lies to ourselves. That's how brainwashing works. That's how fear becomes identity. That's how manipulation becomes invisible. You don't feel it happening until one day you don't recognize the person in the mirror. Maybe you've already felt it. Maybe you've already heard that voice, the one that tells you you're a failure, that you're not worthy, that you don't deserve love, peace, or freedom unless unless you meet someone else's impossible standards. But let me remind you of something they can't take away no matter how loud they get. There is a version of you beneath all the noise, the real you, the one that still remembers what joy feels like, the one that knows when something feels wrong, even if the crowd says it's right, the one that still believes you're worthy, even if no one else does. That voice, that's yours, and you have to protect it, because in a world designed to make you forget who you are, remembering is an act of rebellion. So don't let them break you with fear. Don't let labels define you. Don't follow the crowd off of a cliff just because someone else is clapping. And most of all, don't ignore the voice inside you that still believes in something pure, something good, something free. You are not a lab rat. You are not a diagnosis. You are not a soldier in someone else's experiment. You are a conscious being. You are capable of choice, and you are powerful if you choose to be. Question everything, trust carefully, and above all, love yourself. Because in a world full of manipulation, clarity is a revolution. If you enjoyed this video, don't be afraid to comment and tell me what else you want me to make videos about. Thank you all so much for watching. It really feels so special and important to me that anybody's watching this at all. It just means the world, and I really appreciate you all so much. Thank you again for watching. If you think anything sucked about this, or it could be better, or there's anything at all, just let me know. The more you comment and share this with people and tell others about it, even just liking the video makes a huge difference. So thank you again so much. I love you all.